The Eureka Ensemble is known for its mission of music as a force of social change that applies to engagement with the community and its concerns, but also with being an outlet for emerging artists. All of that applies to the ensemble's next venture, a series of performances and programs focusing on climate change in collaboration with the School for the Environment at UMass Boston. To tell us about Rising Tides are the ensemble's artistic director, Kristo Kondakçi, and the executive director, Andrés. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I want to start with Kristo about this idea, working with UMass on something that involves music and the environment. I mean, how exactly did that come together?
Like all great things in life, it came from my mother, who happens to work for the School for the Environment at UMass Boston. And a few years ago, the School for the Environment put together this conference gathering together scientists and artists and entrepreneurs, business leaders. And I was very happy to get to participate. And they separated us all out into small pods to try and tackle the issue of how to get the language around climate change to be more active and more attractive to getting just people in the regular community to actually get involved. And the solution for each pod actually turned out to be small, local-based arts events. And at the beginning of the year, Andrés and I, we bash heads quite thoroughly to come up with programming for Eureka. And Eureka's mission is to nurture social change through music. And climate change in Boston it's a big deal. What's going to happen here in the next 80 years or so. And so we thought to get pull up our sleeves and get right into the mud of the Boston Harbor and come up with a project that did that. And Andrés, would you want to talk about our fellows?
Yeah, Andrés, what about that? Because this is about emerging composers, but also the idea of the citizen composer. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think in this situation, it's really important to feature young voices because ultimately climate change is going to impact young people the most. And I ended up working with, we brought on 4 fellows. They're actually former students of mine from back when I used to teach at Boston Arts Academy. And it's been really wonderful to see the work they've already been doing because they're all engaged citizens. And so, as you were saying, not just artists, but artists who are engaging in their communities in different ways. Danny Rivera, one of them, for example, has worked with Ayanna Pressley in the past and has helped organize a number of protests in the area. Like he's very embedded in the community. And that goes for all of our fellows. And I think that voice is something that's really important and something that in this project we wanted to amplify, not just musically, but Kristo was talking about the School for the Environment. So each of the fellows was paired with a professor at the School for the Environment who was their environmental expert. And they formed the relationship.
Termed it environmentor.
And that relationship, right? Not just the song that they wrote, but the fact that that song came out of a relationship. If the whole point is that in dealing with climate change, we have to work together as a community, what better way than to encourage songwriting through these relationships?
Kristo, it sounds almost as if we're forcing composers into a mold here, but on the other hand, this is not really new, is it? I mean, composers have always been sort of tuned into social change, even trying to, rescue something that's endangered, even culturally endangered. Isn't that the case?
Well, I mean, just for an example, one of the pieces that we're playing is by somebody on this call. And as a classically trained composer, Andrés has written this work focused on, Andrés, you should introduce it because it's a perfect example of what Chris just asked.
Please do, Andrés.
I actually, a few years ago, started writing this series of short pieces called Impossible Safari. Each short movement focused on a different recently extinct animal. And it's the composer Whitney George, who we're also performing her music, is actually writing a set of pieces called Extinction Series. So independently, we both had this idea of like, wow, this is a series of short pieces that could be endless because we have impacted our world so much. And both Whitney, George, and I approached it from kind of a classical perspective, right? That's Eureka mainly plays classical music, but to your point about kind of getting put in a box, I think one of the cool things about this is that we could be really open-ended because the fellows are people we trust. We could be really open-ended and just say, here's the project, do what you want. And they really took it on themselves. And even though, as I just said, Eureka is more classical than anything, the music that they wrote is all kinds of genres. And we're really excited to be able to share that.
Kristo, what about the program that's going to be performed on Friday?
In terms of
the mix of the music and the thought behind it, maybe?
Yeah, well, all the repertoire has to do with the environment in some way. Like Andrés just said about his piece and Whitney George, we also have a movement from Dvorak Cypress's quartets focused on the cypress forests in the Czech Republic, as well as a piece by another young composer named Sam Wu called Alien Forests, with the idea of, you know, a lot of what people are saying, how do we deal with climate change, is by moving to another planet, which not what we're advocating for at all. But Sam's piece tries to describe through music what an alien forest could look like and sound like. So the idea is just using music to create a vision for the environment.
Andrés, what about the things that engage people? Because you mentioned you wrote a series of compositions that were focused on animals that were in danger of extinction. What made you pick that?
I think at that point, honestly, I had been watching a lot of those David Attenborough documentaries. So I just got an Our Planet binge. And it was really impacting me that how interrelated all the different parts of the planet's ecosystem are, right? It's not just like, oh, an animal went extinct, that's sad because it was a cute animal. It's more that animal went extinct and they served as a really vital part of how this entire gigantic planet-sized machine works. And just the importance of thinking holistically and taking care of not just ourselves, but our natural environment, because that is our health.
Kristo, one of the other things going on in a project like this is you've got assignments for composers. They have deadlines. They have people that they have to deal with. Sometimes that can be a nuisance, but on the other hand, as far as getting things produced, getting the creativity to flow, how important is that?
It's critical, and it's very useful that Andrés used to be a high school teacher, because he was instrumental, pun intended and not intended, in getting our fellows to meet their deadlines. It's very hard for young people to meet deadlines, and especially for composers and songwriters. So giving them, this whole process has been about giving our fellows all the resources to be able to create original music around this topic. And that, of course, has meant the mentorship from the side of our UMass mentors, our environment mentors, but also from an administrative side. Andrés and our assistant conductor, Brittany, have helped them orchestrate their music, have been constantly available to coach and support them. And our AV director, Brandon Johnson, has been an angel when it comes to literally producing the audio and visual stuff that's
Andrés, what about
be made up of?
What you're also doing, Andrés, is that you're putting together something here that's going to be online. We can't just all go to one hall and hear it. So what about making that work?
Sorry, could you repeat that question, please?
About how are you getting this all put together, getting people to plug into this virtually and getting the performers to make it work?
Yeah, well, our fellows, we actually had a preview last week, and our fellows were able to invite a number of people that they knew. The School for the Environment, UMass Boston School for the Environment, has also been incredibly helpful in getting the word out. The preview that we did was part of their Earth Week event. and just reaching out to the Boston Arts Academy community as well, since we have several alumni on the roster. Just really trying to get the word out. I think the message here is when we talk about climate change, it can be such a huge, incomprehensible thing sometimes. So by focusing on the local impacts, that helps a lot. Like it's one thing to know that, okay, ocean levels are rising. That sounds bad. But it's an entirely different for me to think like, oh, well, the Charles is right there. That's going to be flooding in a little bit. So on the one hand, focusing on local impacts. On the other hand, trying to send a positive message that actually there is hope and there is work that we can do. There are actions we can take. And we hope that that message brings people into the event and leaves them on a high note to continue our music puns.
Right. Kristo, finally, if people want to plug into this on Friday, what's the best way for them to get some more details on that?
They can go right to our website, eurekaensemble.org, and there's a big button that they'll be able to see that will lead them right to where they can RSVP. And yes, this is going to be live streamed on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, but it's going to be available for anyone that can't actually make it live to view afterwards.
Well, thank you both very much for taking the time to join us.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Great. That was Kristo Kondakçi and Andrés Ballesteros from the Eureka Ensemble. We'll have more news in just a moment.